Hi, I'm Peter Charles of Book to Life Fly Fishing, and today we're going to look at the types of water we might want to try fishing with a nymph. We're going to look at 3 different kinds of water, and we'll discuss how we might approach it with a nymph, or maybe it's not a good idea to approach it with a nymph. What are our choices? So let's get into the video and see the first example. Now, in any trout river, we're likely to find trout feeding on nymphs regardless of the type of water that we're looking at. Here we're looking at a flat glide. It has no identifiable seams, it has no strong current flows. The flow is so weak, the fish can use this almost like it's a lake, and they can cruise around and select nymphs at will. It becomes quite challenging to fish with a nymph. It can be done. An unweighted nymph on a dry fly leader with perhaps a bit of stripe putty will do the job. But when we're starting out in fly fishing, I would not suggest a beginner try to fish this kind of water with a nymph. I'd be much more inclined to suggest they go after fish here using either wet flies or streamers. They're likely to be much more successful. Even dry fly fishing could be challenging on water like this because the fish aren't necessarily holding in the same spot. They can move around, so you target a rising fish and it shows up someplace else. So if you're going to start nymph fishing, I'd be looking at something like this instead. This is more the kind of water you'd want to be fishing a nymph. Here we have the classic situation where I love to fish a nymph under an indicator. I'm standing in slack water, but in front of me there's a nice current with a foam line going down the middle. Not much of one right now, but it does have a bit of foam. And there's a slow seam on either side, and on the far side there's a bit of slow water as well. So it's a very identifiable run. There is a considerable amount of depth underneath it. I mean, there's plenty of places for the fish to get comfortable in there. And you see I went hung up because I got into the slow water. So reposition, go back out again. And see, I pulled it off the shallow water over there to make sure I don't snag up. And I'm keeping my indicator in the heart of the run. Now, a good indicator nymphing run can be categorized by some fast water running down the middle, slower seams on either side, and deep water underneath it. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. When fishing a run like this, not only do we want to run our indicator right down the middle, but we also want to do the slow water on either side. And as you can see, I've let my indicator run down into the slow water, and now I'm going to pick it up and reposition it. Now put my indicator into the far side, into the far seam, and as it tracks down, it slowly moves its way into the middle and now into the near side seam. When we fish a run like this, we want to make sure we fish the far side seam, the middle of the run, and the near side seam. Now you notice how my indicator transitions from the far side to the near side. That's kind of normal because of the fact of where I'm standing. Now if I want to make sure I cover the far side of the seam further down the run, I will have to shift position. And that's normal, that's typical. So if I would move another 5 or 10 feet downstream and continue the same process, I will end up covering both sides of the run all the way along its length. Okay, let's take a look at water that is more difficult to fish with a nymph rig. Here, the water is quite shallow. There are some deeper pockets which could hold fish, but if you tried to run it with an indicator, you'd snag up all the time. And this is the type of water we might fish with a technique called contact nymphing. Okay, so when we're starting out to learn to fish a nymph under an indicator, don't go off and pick the challenging water. Pick the straightforward water like I'm fishing here. A nice, clearly identifiable run, clearly identifiable seams, and a foam line that gives you a good idea where the fish will be holding and where the bulk of the food conveyor belt is streaming down the river. So make it easier on yourself and pick the good water. Okay, that gives us an idea of what good nymphing water looks like and what less than ideal nymphing water looks like. If we keep an idea in our minds of what we should be looking for when we go out with an indicator and a nymph and some split shot, it'll help our game tremendously. And if we fish unproductive water with this type of rig, yeah, we can catch the odd fish, but the odds are against you. So look for the right kind of water, that fast moving seam with slow water on either side, foam line going down the middle. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we want to see with some depth in it. And when you fish that, there's always going to be some fish in there. So keep that in mind when next time you're out with an indicator rig and a nymph. Cheers.